Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen. I'm an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple different reasons. The first of which is to take my brain out of the mode of background work over the course of the week and move into the process of writing and preparing the sermon that I'll preach to my congregation for the weekend. That's the first reason I do these. And the second is just to allow you, the viewer, who have come across this video for whatever reason brought you here today, whether you are a regular every week visitor, thank you, or if this is the first time you have stumbled across my random ramblings, but just to allow you to gain some insight into the text for the week. So that is why I do these. This particular Sunday, April 14th, 2019, a bit of a word on what this Sunday is. Now, I'm going to call this Sunday Palm Sunday, but some traditions will call this one Passion Sunday. Now, where we are, this is the Sunday that really kicks off Holy Week. It's the final Sunday before Easter, so Easter will be next week, but we've got all of the events of the final week of Jesus' life that are kind of stacked up between this coming Sunday on the 14th and next Sunday on the 21st. Along with that, we'll have Monday, Thursday next week. There's also Good Friday next week, and then, of course, there's Easter Sunday. That's all what's coming up. So we are technically still in the season of Lent, although Holy Week is kind of its own thing, and Palm Sunday is kind of its own thing, and Passion Sunday is kind of its own thing, and I keep doing this, and that's weird, but okay, well, let's move on. Some of the reason for this whole Palm Sunday versus Passion Sunday thing is the desire for congregations or for communities to be able to get kind of the full picture of what does go on through Holy Week, so we don't go just from Jesus' Triumphal Entry, which is the Palm Sunday aspect, straight to the resurrection. So there's a tradition that some have adopted that kind of takes on going through all the way through the Passion narrative, so that it kind of encompasses everything, so that individuals kind of sort of get that story. Now, I don't do that. My congregation does. We just stick with the Palm Sunday, and then we do have the different worship opportunities on Thursday and Friday through Holy Week to kind of pick up on those other aspects as well. So for that reason, with all of that background, Palm Sunday on April 14th, 2019. The gospel, we're in Luke again this year, so it's Luke 19 verses 28 through 40, and as I've already kind of alluded to, it is the story of the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem at the beginning of the week, in the days leading up to the celebration of Passover, which coincides with the betrayal and the arrest and the crucifixion and then subsequent resurrection of Jesus through the tail end of next week. So that is kind of where we're at in the big picture, grand scheme of things in terms of the church year and season and everything that's going on. So that's where we are there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get into it. A little bit of contextual background. Jesus has been on the way towards Jerusalem. We hear that actually fairly early on in Luke's gospel. A big chunk of it is called the travel narrative of the ministry that's going on as his face is turned towards Jerusalem. So we're at now the tail end of that. And as he's gone around, it would seem that Jesus has kind of been following perhaps the Jordan River, which is the eastern boundary of the nation of Israel, and he comes into Jericho. Jericho is known for its its earlier testamental history of Joshua and the Israelites coming in, and that's kind of the first place that they get to. But that was centuries before this. And this is now he encounters Zacchaeus there. If you're familiar with the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, the wee little man who climbed the sycamore tree, that all happened there. So that has just happened in the narrative before we pick up. And following that encounter with Zacchaeus, Jesus has told a parable. And with that, that's where we're going to pick up here in verse 28. So Luke 28 through 40. After he had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. When he came near Bethpage and Bethany at the place called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of the disciples, saying, "Go into the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it? Just say this, the Lord needs it. So those who were sent departed and found it as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, why are you untying the colt? They said, the Lord needs it. Then they brought it to Jesus, and after throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. As he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. Now he was approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives. I got to start that over. As he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, Teacher, order your disciples to stop. He answered, I tell you, if these were silent, the stones would shout out. Okay, so that's the story. And now some thoughts. So Jesus is coming into the city. I kind of talked earlier. He was coming up from Jericho. Jericho is out to the southeast of Jerusalem, not very far away. It's only maybe 10 or 15 miles away. It's really not very far away. But then we hear he's going up to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is kind of up elevation-wise in a mountain, and so around that area, everything is up to Jerusalem, regardless of what direction you're coming from. But so he's coming up that direction, and as we hear, he approaches from the east, from the area of Bethpage and Bethany. Now that's kind of an odd thing. We think Bethpage was actually on the other side of the city, but Bethany is out to the east, across the Kidron Valley from the Temple Mount, just past the peak of the Mount of Olives. So that's kind of the direction he's coming from. That's for a specific reason. It fulfills some prophecy. The whole riding on the colt of the donkey is some prophecy fulfillment going on as well. You know, there's a lot of little connections here. Now, Matthew's gospel tries to make that a little bit stronger than Luke's does, just because of the tendency of Matthew to do that. So there's this whole situation going on of Jesus telling two of his disciples, go ahead into the village. You're going to find a colt there. It's never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anybody asks you why, tell them the Lord needs it. So there's questions of, well, did Jesus have this prearranged, or is this Jesus displaying his the divine all-knowing sensibility? You know, what's going on here? Maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe all that matters is that they go and they find the colt and they bring it back. They put their cloaks on it, and Jesus gets up on the donkey, or the colt of the donkey, and rides down this very steep mountain through a graveyard, or at least right now it's a graveyard. And I don't know if it was already a graveyard when Jesus would have been riding down this road or not. All I know is it's a very large graveyard now. But down through this very steep descent down into the valley. And then he'll go back up and go through a gate, which is now closed, but a gate through the walls into the city and up onto the Temple Mount where the temple would have been. That's kind of what's going on here. So there's a lot of different things at play. Jesus is entering kind of like a conquering hero would have done so. In fact, Alexander the Great had done so about 300 years prior to this. He had ridden in and even sacrificed in the temple, which was kind of a big no-no, but he did it anyway. But he's not riding in a chariot. He's not riding on some great big war horse. He's riding the colt of a donkey, which is kind of very humble and a bit eye-opening. It subverts expectations of what you would think is going on. Pardon me, I wet your nose. You maybe hear it in my voice. I'm getting over a cold right now, so the joys of the human body. But okay, so he's got this thing going on that he's riding a colt, so immediately like subverting some of those expectations. And yet there is joy in his arrival. And what's ironic, we call this Palm Sunday. Luke's account, there are no palms. Did you notice that? That they're spreading their cloaks out over the road. Again, this is a sign of respect for the visiting dignitary, or for the VIP, the ultimate VIP, that they're preparing the way as he comes into the city. So that is happening. There is this sense of celebration, and yet there's tension too. And this is one of the things that I really appreciate about Luke's account of the Triumphal Entry, more so than any of the other accounts, that we have this sense of division. Now we hear that some of the Pharisees tell him, rebuke your disciples, basically keep them quiet, hush them up. And I think it's our tendency to consider that just the normal. They're the biblical bad guys. You know, if this was a old movie, they'd be the bad guy spinning his twisting his mustache all mischievously, and that's probably not accurate in any sense of the word. And as I think about this, there's a point that really comes up that begins to reveal the distinction. There's in the original language, in the Greek, there are two different words that we tend to translate as crowd. Actually, here it's multitude and then it's crowd, but so it's different words in this particular translation too. But the sense is pretty much the same. That but we hear that the multitude of his disciples, and that's from the Greek word. Do I have it written down? Plathos, which sounds a lot like plethora. From the plethora of his disciples, they were cheering. They were the ones that were cheering. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. They were the ones who were spreading their cloaks on the road. They were the ones who were celebrating really this entry. But then there's all these other people, and we hear that some of the Pharisees from the crowd. Now the crowd, or what we say crowd there, is from the Greek word oklos, and maybe a little better translation of that is the mob, the faceless, just sea of people. Some from the crowd are telling, "Hey, hush up your disciples." And then there's the whole exchange with, Jesus says, if they're silent, then the rocks will cry out. So I've been thinking a lot about what's the motivation of these particular individuals who are kind of trying to hush them up. And is it just because they don't like Jesus, or is there something else at play here? Now, we think about the whole political and grand scheme thing. So everyone's coming into the city for the Passover, and that's why there's so many people around. And that includes the Romans. Now, the Romans were not there to celebrate the Passover, but they know that in this region, this is one of the three big festivals, and it's a big deal for the culture. There's going to be a lot of extra people. So there's an extra Roman presence to help keep the peace, to make sure things don't get out of hand. We'll see a hint of this later with Pilate in the trial of Jesus. Pilate, we often hear, doesn't want to execute Jesus. He sees no reason to do it. Certainly not by crucifixion, because crucifixion is capital punishment for sedition. It's very much a political statement for someone to be crucified. And yet he wants to keep the peace. Pilate was, from what we know, Pilate was kind of on thin ice with the upper muckety mucks of the Roman Empire. And so he was not wanting to have any issues under his watch. So he's kind of keeping an eye on that, and yet all of this is going on. It's all kind of tied together. So I wonder if the Pharisees that we hear about, these particular individuals, are they just thinking, hey, he's kind of coming in like a conquering king. Maybe we need to kind of keep it down a little bit. Otherwise, the Romans are going to catch wind of it, and that could be bad for all of us. So let's just tone it down a little bit. Is that the sense that's going on? And we don't know. But there's some possibility to that. And so I bring all this up because I think it's important that we don't just view this as so black and white, good and evil, cut and dry. This is the motivation, and these are the bad guys, and these are the good guys, and this is what we should think, and this is what we should do. Life is a whole lot messier than that. And that's what I'm really kind of wanting to focus in on with this sermon, but not only with this, but through the course of Holy Week, that all of this, we need to put some flesh on it. We need to remember that this is real life, that this is not just a story, that this is, there were real people with real motivations and real struggles and real challenges, and all of it's mixed up and messy on both sides of the coin. And I think a lot about that when we start talking about the incarnation, an incarnational faith, that we recognize that our faith is in a God that puts flesh on. And that's not just Jesus, although yes, it is too. But it's that the mundane, ordinary things in life and the really joyful things and the really rough things, all of this is tied together into our faith. And can we be honest about that? And can we be honest about this amazing event that was going on, but recognize that, okay, this celebration that was happening, in hindsight, we know that was premature because all the people who were celebrating are going to abandon him. And he's going to be tortured. He's going to be killed. And that's seemingly the end of it until a couple of days later when all of a sudden it's not the end of it again. And this is some amazing, amazing stuff. And I fear sometimes that our familiarity with it almost dulls it down. And so I'm really trying to focus in on where is the amazement? Where is the holy? Where is the aspect that it's bigger than we can really wrap our heads around? And I think I find that I'm coming all the way back around now. I'm going to kind of wrap this up. So the last thing Jesus says, if these were silent, if the people who are celebrating are silent, the very rocks would cry out. Well, what do we make of that? And I kind of think it speaks to the idea that all of creation speaks to the glory of God. All of creation is a mirror of the wonder of God, the wonder of God's creation, the joy that God takes in creation, the place that we have in that essentially all of it is a testament to whatever it is that God is doing. Now, can we fully grasp it? Of course not. Can we understand it? A little, but completely? Heck no. And that's all okay. That's all good. And that is, I think, humbling in a really good way when we recognize that there is something out there that is bigger than we are, and that whatever or whoever it is looks favorably upon us. And this is all a part of it. And this whole overarching story of Holy Week is all a part of it. It's not just this one event. It's not just one tiny little thing, but it's one thing that leads to the next thing, that leads to the next thing, that leads to the next thing. And it's my hope that we are able to really grasp onto that and experience that. So that's kind of where I'm going with this particular sermon. If you have thoughts, questions, comments, by all means, throw them down in the comment section. There's been a few more of those popping up lately, which I greatly appreciate. And if you appreciate these videos that I do and you think that they are a benefit, just know that they are an aspect of the ministry that the congregation I serve allows me to do. It's an outreach of that congregation that I serve. And so if you feel so led and you would like to support the ministry that allows me to do these, down in the comment section, I'll include a link to our congregation's website. You can follow that to our online donation page, and that would be greatly appreciated. You want to throw a few shekels our way to kind of support the ministry that allows me to do these. Otherwise, I hope you have a blessed week, a blessed Holy Week especially, and we will catch you next time with probably a couple different videos coming up in the next week for the different sermons that I'll be doing. Catch you later, everyone.